Chapter 9. By the end of the first hour, the sounds of battle had grown to a head-pounding roar. The reserve army, most of whom were sprawled on the ground to get some rest, heard conflicting reports. The Rebs were putting up a vigorous battle. The Rebs were being beaten so badly they'd never recover. The 1st Missouri and the 1st Kansas had valiantly reached the site where they were calling Bloody Hill and were winning the battle. Only that last report were true. No such luck. On the contrary, the shells from the Confederates' battery kept forcing back the Union troops. By 8 o'clock, Mike thought he couldn't stand to wait another minute. Then orders came for the 2nd Kansas to go to the aid of the 1st Missouri, which was about to be overcome. Colonel Mitchell, Captain Dawes, and the other officers mounted their horses. It was close to 9 o'clock, and the sun was blaring at a bright silver gold before Mike, energetically beating out the call to advance, began to climb to the hill of Captain Dawes' side. The men in Dawes' company eagerly surged forward, so Mike was almost upon the bodies that lay sprawled on the ground before he saw them. He gagged as bile rose in his throat, and for an instant he was too sickened to beat his drum. "Steady, Mr. Kelly," Captain Dawes' voice was firm. Mike took a deep breath and tried to concentrate on the drum beats, but he couldn't ignore the sight of the dead all around him, some with gaping wounds in their chests, some with parts of their heads blown away. The most terrifying sight was the wounded soldiers who were still alive, some writhing and screaming in agony. No one at the moment could respond to their cries. In desperation, Mike forced his gaze beyond the crest of the hill to the cornfields and the oat fields below, where men in blue fought men in gray, thrashing their way through broken stalks. He noticed a small white farmhouse close to the road, not too far from Wilson's Creek. Confederate soldiers positioned at the back of the house kept up a barrage of fire at Union soldiers who had reached the roadway. Where were the people in the farmhouse, Mike wondered. Why had they been able to get out of the way of the raging fury? A bullet bounced off the rim of Mike's drum. The force made him stagger, but he quickly straightened, keeping his drum beats loud and true despite the fear that gnawed his stomach and made his head throb. A wave of Rebs pushed forward, unloading their muskets. There was no time to reload. They jabbed and stabbed all about them with the bayonets attached to the muskets' barrels. A Southerner about Todd's age bellowed in agony. He clasped a Union soldier who had fallen, screaming, "I shot my pa! Oh, God, please help me! I shot my pa!" Horrified, Mike cried out too, but what would his cries accomplish? A mass of 2nd Kansas volunteers rushed forward, and after they passed, a Reb lay dead on the ground next to his father. The tears streamed down Mike's cheeks, and he hunched his shoulder to wipe them away. A blow from the side sent him sprawling. It took Mike a moment to understand that a heavy body had fallen on top of him. A strong hand helped Mike to his feet. He looked at the face of a dead man. "Captain Dawes!" he shouted. "No, not the captain!" Someone began leading Captain Dawes' horse away. The captain's body slung over the saddle, and dazed, Mike staggered after them. Sergeant Gridley grabbed Mike's shoulder and shoved the drumsticks into his hands. "Keep up the call to advance, Mr. Kelly. That's your job. I'll tell you if you need a drum retreat, and I hope that may never be." "Yes, sir," Mike stammered, sick at heart, cold with terror at the destruction all around him. Mike stood his post, drum beat steady. Although Mike wouldn't have thought it possible, the fighting grew even more intense. The roar of cannons, the musket fire, the screams and shouts. It was a bad dream, a blood-red nightmare, a horror that wouldn't end. During a blessed lull in the fight, General Lyon rode up astride of his gray horse and regrouped the Federal line. Leading the 2nd Kansas himself, Lyon began the charge against the Confederates, but the Rebs had rallied in even greater numbers, and the fighting grew fierce among the entire line. For an hour the battle roared with fury, and Mike, finding a perch on a rock ledge near the brow of the hill, bravely kept drumming. Nearby he could hear Todd's bugle. Mike could only hope the call to battle spurred the soldiers of his company onward, helping them fight even more aggressively. Near Mike a man cursed and nearly dropped his musket. "Barrel's too hot," he yelled. "Burnt my hands." A soldier at Mike's left fell. With an angry yell, Ben charged into the breach, cutting in front of Mike, but before he could shoot, an enemy bullet struck Ben's head, splattering his blood and brains onto Mike's face and jacket. More powerful even was the wave of nausea that enveloped Mike was one horrible thought. He was alive only because Ben, brutally killed, had blocked a bullet aimed in his direction. As the battle raged around him, Mike beat his drum numbly, as though he were no longer a part of his body. A sudden burst of fire brought down General Lyon's horse. Lyon pulled himself up from under the animal and limped forward, waving his sword and shouting. Mike saw blood streaming down the general's forehead and his leg. Soldiers from the 1st Iowa staggered back. "We have no leader," someone shouted. "Give us a leader." "You have a leader," Mike heard Lyon call to them. "Sweeney, lead those troops forward. We'll make them one more charge." As orderly's horse, Lyon rode into the fray, swinging his hat and calling out to the 2nd Kansas, "Come on, my brave boys, I'll lead you forward." His horse had been taken but a few steps before Lyon clutched his chest and fell. His orderly caught him and carried him gently to the ground. "Our general's dead," he cried. The fierce blast of musket fire killed Colonel Mitchell, too. Many of the Union soldiers, dazed and confused, turned to retreat. Mike slammed the drumsticks into rat-tat-tat with all his strength. "This is not a call to retreat," he shouted. "Fight, men! Fight the Rebs!" Harley's voice bellowed. "Does the boy have more spirit than the rest of us?" Harley ran ahead, and the soldiers who hesitated now turned and followed him. "Good work, Mr. Kelly," Sergeant Gridley called out. Mike's eyes filled with tears. This is what Captain Dawes would have said. Mike's arms were heavy and painful from the relentless pounding of his drum, but beneath the mercilessly shining sun, Mike beat on. Hearing the loud blare of Todd's bugle, Mike glanced at his right and saw Todd standing near the front lines. "We'll beat him, Todd!" Mike yelled. But before Todd could respond, the Confederates surged toward the Federals. Whooping with excitement, a Reb charged directly at Todd, plunging his bayonet through Todd's chest. "Todd! No! No!" Mike screamed, but there was nothing he could do. Clutching his chest with a cry, blood spurting through his fingers, Todd fell to the ground and lay still. With a grin, the Reb scooped up Todd's bugle, tucked his trophy into his shirt, and plowed forward, holding his bayonet before him. Mike started after the Reb who had killed Todd. "I'll get you!" he sobbed over and over. But as Mike stepped to pick up the musket, a horse rode into Mike's path. "Drummer!" the rider shouted. "Keep up your business! Shout retreat, boy, now!" Fighting nausea, tears streaming down his eyes, Mike obeyed orders. He dropped the musket and stood his ground, beating out the call as the Rebs advanced with eager shouts. Suddenly, a gray uniformed Reb slammed through the underbrush and came face to face with Mike. His musket and bayonet pointed at Mike's forehead. Mike closed his eyes. This was it. He winced as he waited to be shot. But the soldier groaned. "I can't shoot a boy," he muttered. The Reb roughly pushed past him, but there was no time for relief. Other Confederates were pouring up the hill through the gap in the underbrush. A shot ripped through Mike's drum, tearing at the strap around his neck, and another shot struck his right leg. Mike fell from the ledge where he stood. He rolled uncontrollably down the hill, sharp pebbles scratching his face and arms. His leg felt like it was on fire. "I have to get help, or I'll die," Mike thought. As he landed headfirst against a tree trunk, a sea of blackness curled around him, plunging him into a deep, pain-free unconsciousness.